It is good to be here with you this morning, and I am grateful to my friend and colleague who is preaching for me over at the chapel so that I can be here. And I am grateful to my friend and colleague, your pastor, Lisa, for the invitation to be with you here this morning. It is my hope and prayer that we will all find this morning meaningful. Now, I'm with you because Lisa's at annual conference. I was in Chicago 2 weeks ago for the Northern Illinois annual conference. This time of year, it's what Methodists do. We get together for annual conferences. For those of you who may not know what annual conferences or general conferences are, feel free to grab me after the service and I'll be happy to explain it. Or you can give Lisa a call when she gets back. I'm sure she'd love to tell you about her time in Roanoke, what was meaningful, and part of our tradition. As many of you may already know, insofar as it has been in the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, the Christian Century, the Huffington Post, just to name a few sources, one of the things that is being discussed at our annual conferences is the conflict around human sexuality that came up at our general conference. At its most simple, the difference can be summed up like this. Is the only faithful way to be sexual as a human being found within the matrices of heterosexuality? Rather than legislate the issue or divide the denomination, the Council of Bishops is creating a commission to look at a solution that can overcome the differences within the denomination. Many of the bishops have provided responses back to their annual conferences, and Virginia is no exception. You can find Bishop Cho's pastoral letter online. I actually would like to begin our reflection this morning with a sentence from that letter. After talking a lot about what I have just summarized for you, the bishop quotes from that letter to the Philippians, where we read that Christ emptied himself to take up humanity. And the bishop writes, I respect each of your convictions based on conscience. But we also need to recognize that no one owns 100% of God's truth. And all of us need humility, emptying ourselves before God as Jesus did. From where I stand, that is pretty good advice. None of us own God's truth. Yet this is more complex at corporate and institutional levels. Most of us are aware that no political or corporate team agrees about everything. But we're also aware that good teams, after rigorous debate amongst themselves, will come out united. They will champion the cause, even if in the meeting they were the biggest opponents of that particular issue. Unified institutional positions belie the diversity and multiplicity that exist within the institutions. The United Methodist Church is no different. In the letter to the Galatians, we encounter a beautiful, meaningful passage. The text lifts up a vision of humanity in which all are equal, regardless of race or gender. Again and again, within our world, where real gender differences and real racial differences result in real social and political difference, this passage has been lifted up again and again to call us to find another way. Yet, as with all calls to unity, this call to unity is not without its problems. While Paul's impulse toward the founding of a non-differentiated, non-hierarchical humanity was laudable, Many of its effects in terms of actual lives were not. In terms of ethnicity, his system required that all human cultural specificities be eradicated, whether or not the people in question were willing. Moreover, since of course there is no such thing as cultural unspecificity, merging of all people into one common culture means ultimately merging all people into the dominant culture. In terms of gender, for Paul, as indeed for nearly everyone until now, autonomy and something like true equality for women were bought at the expense of sexuality and maternity. Also, analogously to the culture question, the erasure of gender seems always to end up positing maleness as the norm to which women can aspire. Let me reiterate that point. There is no such thing as cultural unspecificity. When we talk about a melting pot, what we often mean is that the many become like the one. We have to acknowledge that in these moments, all are asked to accept a certain heteronormativity, Anglo-normativity, masculine normativity. There are always those who exist outside of such hegemonic norms, who find them confining, restrictive, and exclusive. The call to human oneness, at the same time that it is a stirring call to equality, constitutes a threat as well to any other difference. Why the hurry to move to a sense of unity, of being one together? Why can't we just remain many together? Many people, many Christianities, many ways, without foreclosing the conversations that might, over time, reveal the effects of our power relations on the very real differences between us. Why the hurry? Certainly many of us are uncomfortable with ambiguity and conflict. Why the hurry? How do we think beyond the instantaneous and the momentary? How do we deal with the momentary conflict for a lasting solution? How do we live with multiplicity? Why can't we acknowledge that we were never meant to own God's truth? William J. Abraham is the Albert Shook Outler Professor of Wesley Studies at Southern Methodist University and Perkins Seminary, as well as an ordained elder in the Southwest Texas Conference. Abraham wrote a reflection on the 2016 United Methodist General Conference, and he does think in terms of years and decades. He is not in a hurry to move to unity, but he is making an argument for a unique identity that is evolving within the United Methodist Church. He is advocating being one instead of many. In the midst of this argument, Abraham argues that pluralism is incoherent. Although his argument is slightly more subtle and nuanced, it's basically the old trope that tolerance is not tolerant of intolerance, and therefore it's logically inconsistent. Abraham argues that pluralism has been shelved insofar as it has been overtaken by its own incoherent internal logic. Although I disagree with his assessment, he is right about one thing. Pluralism is not easy. It involves embracing complexity and ambiguity. It cannot rest on false dichotomies of oversimplifications. Living with multiplicities means living humbly, listening and learning more than teaching and talking. The way of pluralism cannot choose an undisturbed particularity, neither can it appeal to an unconscious universalism. It chooses the way of a relational multiplicity with the full awareness that as such it remains risky and powerful. At stake in the United Methodist Church, and I would say in our country and in our world, is whether we recognize and embrace our plurality, or choose to go the way of an imperial colonial hegemonic church that compels conformity and expels those who will not or cannot conform. By framing the issue within these terms, it should be obvious that I am already stating unequivocally that I am opposed to the future Abraham dreams. I think it is an apocalyptic dystopian nightmare of religious conformity. I think it ignores the fact that we are already a pluralistic multiplicity in relation. Visit two Methodist congregations who do not have good brand control. They are high church and low church. They are progressive and conservative. They are poor and rich. They are growing. They are dying. Pluralism is not incoherent. It is what we are already living in. Whether we are living in it well is the question. It is our rebellion against this reality, our lying to ourselves, our need to believe that we have 100% of God's truth that blinds us to the very real multiplicity and allows us to consciously and unconsciously compel others to conform to our hegemonic cultural illusion of unity. The truth is, we do not always live within a pluralistic environment well. This is why we return to this reading from the letter to the Galatians, and we seek to read it well. Particular gender, class, race differences matter and are important. So is the call to an egalitarian reality. We cannot choose one or the other, but must find a way to choose both. The claims of difference and the desire for universality are both contradictorily necessary. There are a million places we can go to look at this. But certainly this morning, Orlando is one of them. Last week, as many of us were gathering to worship, the news was just starting to come in about a shooting at a nightclub. If we had enough information, some of us squeezed in a mention of the incidents in our prayers. Most of us spent the rest of Sunday and the early part of this week figuring out what had happened. As the initial shock, lack of real information, and abundance of misinformation gave way to a better sense of what had happened and some of the possible reasons, although even today we are still searching for answers. We know that Omar Mateen went into a club that was frequented primarily by gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender persons, and using a handgun and an assault rifle killed and wounded more than 100 people. According to his father, he had recently expressed a lot of anger about seeing two men kissing in public. He also was engaging members of this community in online forms of social media. would appear that the decision to target this club because of who would be there was not an accident. I cannot tell you for certain why Mr. Mateen did what he did. I am neither an investigative reporter nor a forensic psychologist. There is more than enough information out there for each of you to read and come up with your own positions and understandings. What I can tell you is that I believe that this is one moment where one person sought to impose his particular view of the world in a universalizing way that created an erasure of human difference. Although I cannot tell you what he believed, I can tell you that he acted as if he owned 100% of the truth. I believe that finding a way toward consciously embracing the multiplicities of our communities will make the world better. I believe that humanity in all of its diversity reflects the image of God, which is to say that I believe that God is filled with a rich and beautiful difference. I believe that finding a way to make pluralism work, as opposed to dismissing, is the way forward for the church and the world if we want to be about the work of a holy commonwealth. I believe that we should work to reveal the permanent incompleteness of our institutions. The same writer, who told us that there is neither male nor female in Christ, told us in another letter that the church is one body with many parts. He told us that the church is a unified reality that exists in radical particularity. He told us that difference and universality are both necessary. And if we read him well, we will live into this tension. When we are tempted to create false unities and erase the difference of others by making them invisible, we are reminded that the foot cannot say to the ear, I have no need of you. When we are tempted to say that eyes are more important than noses, we are reminded that we are all equal before and in God, and that men are not better than women, whites are not better than blacks, Muslims are not better than Christians, and heterosexuals are not better than homosexuals. We need both the claims of difference and the desire for universality, always and ever.